Virginia has begun early voting, early in-person voting specifically. And over the weekend, we got a little taste of what's to come when it comes to Trump supporters and how they're going to try to intimidate voters at in-person voting locations. So as hundreds of voters lined up in Virginia, Trump protesters attempted to block people from entering voting stations. So we have a video kind of showing what the scene looked like. Let's take a quick look at that. So this took place in Virginia's Fairfax County over the weekend, and there were voters who spoke to the press who said that they felt intimidated. By the way, I mean, these protesters have no idea how anyone is planning on voting, but it doesn't matter. They want to prevent people from participating in the election, which is election interference. That's a serious crime. But I don't see any Democrats making a big deal about this. I don't hear them talking about the criminality of doing something like this. And it's really frustrating to see how emboldened these people feel in basically preventing people from participating in our democratic process. Now, Fairfax County officials said that another entrance to the building had to be opened up so voters who were waiting could go in and vote. Gary Scott, who's the Fairfax County General Registrar, said citizens coming into and leaving the building did have to go by them. Those voters who were in line outside the building were moved inside, and we continued operations. Some voters and election staff did feel intimidated by the crowd, and we did provide escorts past the group. One of the escorts was the county executive. Also, the New York Times reported on the incident only to be mocked by the Virginia County GOP, which of course on Twitter said, quick, someone call the wambulance, which further proves how little these Republican officials care about protecting our democracy and our democratic process. And of course, the county GOP thinks there was no reason to feel intimidated with these large crowds screaming at voters who were trying to cast their ballots. Sean Rastetter said the following: I don't think there was any way to need or feel intimidated in any form. But look, guys, take a step back and think about some of the rhetoric coming from Donald Trump. Just recently during a rally in Minneapolis, Trump was bragging about how cops had shot a rubber bullet at a journalist, specifically Ali Velshi from MSNBC, who was on the ground covering the George Floyd protests back in May. Trump was gloating about that. He was happy about the violence toward reporters. So anyone who's been paying attention to the news and paying attention to Donald Trump's rhetoric knows that he constantly gives his base a green light in carrying out acts of violence. He also defended Kyle Rittenhouse, who broke the law by crossing state lines twice with an illegal gun. Then he proceeded to shoot and kill 2 protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Trump defended that. And I think that those kinds of messages and that kind of rhetoric does make people feel intimidated. So this is terrible. And this is just a taste of what's to come, Cenk.
Yeah, so let's be clear about a couple of things. There's a certain distance that you have to maintain from a voting area, and you cannot cross that line. And so if they were close to the voting area outside and they were past that line, there definitely should be action taken, especially if they're going to get together in a big way like that and kind of chant and etc. Right? If they're past the line, I'm thick-skinned. I don't care at all. I know everybody's different, but like, 4 more years. That's like your problem, man. I don't. Who cares? So now. But not everybody thinks like I do, and so
exactly,
especially given the violence that the right wing has done throughout these last 4 years, and the things that Anna mentioned, tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, the Charlottesville rally, and we can go on and on. I can see why some people would not be as thick-skinned as I am, and plus, it's a different situation. I'm a big burly guy, and so I'm not worried about any fight with MAGA guys or anything like that, but other people might feel intimidated. Now, by the way, you know me, I always fight fire with fire. I would say, okay, if you're gonna do that, we should do that. So what we should do is, and this is really simple, and you would think if you're a normal, decent person, you'd be like, Cenk, why would that make any difference? Just take working class Latinos and any African Americans. They could be dressed in a 3-piece suit, it doesn't matter, and put them within the legal, limits outside of the line where they can stand, right? So you're not violating any laws, and just have them show up to all the voting areas that are predominantly Republican. Now, you and I would think, oh, cool, so what, right? But Republicans are so scared to death of minorities. I don't know, maybe put a couple LGBTQ folks near voting stations. They might turn around and go home. I mean, because we could use their irrational fear against them. If you're afraid of a black guy in a suit, great, then don't show up to vote. And by the way, do Democrats look to protect the line of where you can stand and not? I'm sure that there's a couple of instances, but barely, if ever, right? Mm-hmm. When in my election, I was standing outside a voting area, which is what every person who's running who cares does on election day, and you follow the legal limits, et cetera, right? And I was doing that meticulously. Nonetheless, I had at least 3 Republican men come yell at the top of their lungs at me, "You're not allowed anywhere near voting stations!" Like, you're wrong, you can go ask the person inside, et cetera. No, when the Democrats do it, Republicans lose their minds. Just go hold up any political sign, again, in the legally allowed area outside of a voting station, and you will have Republicans try to commit violence against you. So that's the difference between the two parties.
I should also note that just today, Governor Ron DeSantis proposes new legislation that increases penalties for crimes committed during protests. So he's, of course, the Republican governor of Florida, and we all know what kinds of protests he's specifically referring to, Black Lives Matter protests, things like that. But I would venture to say that when it comes to pro-Trump protesters interfering with voters who show up in person to cast their ballots, no penalties for them, right? I mean, I'm just guessing here, but I think it's understandable why I would guess that way. Finally, I should note that Fairfax County, where this situation took place with the Trump voters and Trump supporters, actually did overwhelmingly vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. 2/3 of voters there cast their ballots in favor of Hillary Clinton, which is what motivated those Trump supporters to show up and block people from entering to vote.
I'm telling you, all you need is 2 or 3 black folks per voting station will suppress the Republican vote by 10 points. 10% of Republicans will see black folks outside, perfectly legal, law-abiding, patriotic Americans, and they'll look at them and go, "Oh, black folks," and they'll turn around. Now, Democrats will never do that, but if you can, by the way, if black, Latino, Muslim, gay, go out and stand in front of a voting station, you'll deter Republicans by your mere presence. That's how afraid of you they are.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.